Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're jumping into a really powerful idea from our source material. What if history isn't just a bunch of stories we tell each other, but is actually a vital piece of social technology? A system that, when it's working right, literally prevents us from repeating our worst mistakes. But what happens when that system breaks? Let's get into it.
So let's start with just one word, and one really heavy question that our source poses. Why do we so meticulously preserve a place of such unimaginable suffering? Well, the answer, according to the material we're looking at, isn't just about honoring the past. It's about engineering a more stable future. It's about creating what the source calls a tamper-evident fossil of the truth.
And this brings us to our first big idea. The source frames the preservation of a place like Auschwitz not simply as a memorial, but as a structural anchor. It's a non-negotiable defense against the erasure of truth.
And this is where that idea of tamper-evident history really clicks into place. You see, Auschwitz, with all its preserved artifacts, its records, its names, it isn't just making an argument against denial, it is the physical evidence. The source uses this incredible phrase for it, an append-only fossil, a permanent record that puts a hard limit on what can be plausibly denied.
Okay, so that's what happens when we preserve these anchors. But now let's flip it. What happens when they're lost? What happens when our physical memory literally goes up in smoke?
This comparison really drives the point home. On one hand, you have Auschwitz, which is intact. On the other, the Library of Constantinople, which was completely lost, and the cost of that loss was immense. It wasn't just about losing some books. It was about erasing verifiable references. As our source puts it, this forced entire societies to relearn knowledge at a staggering cost. When the evidence is gone, every single generation has to relitigate reality from scratch.
So, this stark contrast between a preserved site that anchors the truth and a lost archive that lets it drift away, well, that reveals the core concept of our source material today.
This source calls this symbolic memory, and you can kind of think of it as society's operating system for truth. It's the system that connects claims to evidence. It's what ensures that concepts like dignity, rights, and the hard-won lessons of the past can actually survive beyond a single government or a single generation.
And when that operating system crashes, a very predictable decay process kicks in. First, the physical memory, the evidence, is erased. Then, without those anchors, the stories and narratives begin to drift into what the source calls hallucination. And finally, you end up with myth replacing verifiable facts. Contradictions can thrive because there's no shared, auditable reality to check them against.
Now, this is not just some abstract lesson about history. The source material takes this principle of symbolic memory and applies it directly to ongoing conflicts, using the conflict between Israel and Palestine as a case study for how you could build a functional memory system in real time. And the key proposal is what it calls an artifact-first approach. Now, this method is designed to be neutral, to work for all sides by constraining propaganda and enabling the possibility of future justice. You see, it's not about finding one single narrative that everybody agrees on. It's about building a shared ledger of verifiable facts that anyone can audit for themselves.
And our source gets very specific about what this means on the ground. We're talking about creating concrete public ledgers for things like casualty logs, property registers, detainee lists, even ceasefire violations. The idea is that by creating a public, append-only record of these artifacts, you can start to construct a shared, auditable reality, even in the middle of a conflict.
So, how do we actually put this into practice? How do we build this system? Well, the source material doesn't just stop at the idea. It outlines a clear, prescriptive framework for getting it done.
What's so crucial here is that for every single way that memory can fail, there's a concrete structural solution. If narratives are overriding facts, the solution is to publish artifact-first ledgers. If justice is always delayed, the solution is to prepare the systems for restitution now. This approach basically transforms never forget from a slogan into a practical, engineering-based framework.
And this is really the ultimate takeaway. The source argues that a robust, public, and auditable symbolic memory isn't a luxury. It isn't a nice-to-have. It is a fundamental system requirement for any society that wants to avoid repeating its worst cycles. Without durable, verifiable artifacts, repair is simply impossible.
And that leaves us with a final and pretty provocative thought. If history is an operating system built on evidence, then what artifacts are we, you, me, all of us, creating or allowing to be erased today? What is going to anchor the truth for the people who come after us?